Welcome to the Audacious Freedom Podcast, episode number 3, called 31 Years Ago Today. It's about May 19th, 2021, and recorded on May 23rd, 2021. 31 years ago, I am your host, Dee Dee Mendez. I am a storyteller, a perpetual student of self-development, and an audacious life liver, among many other areas of expertise and interests. I am most recently the founder of audaciousfreedom.com. I come to you, my listeners, with stories about what I learn, read, observe, and experience in the world today. I'm so inspired by many other storytellers, and I'm told I inspire others as well with my own stories. 31 years ago today, I thought I was the shit and that my young life had finally sort of arrived, and that I had officially reached lovability status. I was 24 years old, just 6 years out of fucking high school. And I had waited my entire life, at least since my teenage life, for this day. Just a few weeks before this day, my fiance and I had closed on the purchase of our brand new townhouse in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. It was a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 2-level home with a gas burning fireplace. It was 1,400 square feet, and we had chosen the highest grade white wall-to-wall carpeting. This was May 19th, 1990, and I was waking up in the townhouse all by myself the morning of my wedding. My fiance had stayed with friends the night before, so we didn't see each other before the ceremony, as if we could prevent our doomed marriage. Our marriage had already been doomed when we had gotten engaged 2 or 3 years earlier. We got engaged to prevent me from breaking up with him. The diamond on my finger prevented the breakup for about 12 or 13 years through the engagement and almost 9 years of marriage when he asked to separate. It's now been over 20 years since the split, so why do I seem to still take pause or even choke back a tear on this May 19th, 2021, 31 years after my wedding day? I don't know, May 19th, 1990 was the date I set for my wedding, the day I thought my fiance would truly begin to see me, know me, and cherish me, the day I thought he would become a husband and a real man, the day I thought I truly entered adulthood and would never have to answer to anyone ever again, at least not to my family. My wedding gown was perfect, something about all this lace and a peplum, which was removable, and these rhinestones studded white satin pumps with toe cleavage. That was a thing. I don't know if it's ever been a thing since then, but toe cleavage was a thing. And this big elaborate wedding reception in the brand new conference center and resort near our home with, top shelf booze at the open bar. And we'd chosen a buffet dinner, which was more expensive than a sit down dinner. I was such a snob. What can I say? It was the beginning of the ostentatious 1990s, and we were going to be flying out in the morning to the Canary Islands for a honeymoon. It was such a good show everyone had put on, my now husband, our families, and I. He and I had taken second jobs for over a year, or maybe it was even 2 or 3 years, I don't remember, to save money for a down payment on the townhouse and for our honeymoon. My parents, who must have had a few good years financially as entrepreneurs, agreed to splurge for the wedding reception for about 150 people. My husband's father and his third wife paid for the rehearsal dinner, very elaborate, at a steakhouse downtown DC. And it was all just really a good show. I remember finding out after we got back from our honeymoon that at least 3 couples had formed, if only for the night of our wedding. My husband's twin sister had hooked up with one of my uncles, a friend, a neighbor, family friend who hooked up with a coworker of mine, and 2 friends of mine from high school had hooked up that night. And my husband and I were so proud, felt responsible for bringing those people together and all the other fun at the reception, including something to do with doing shots and then handstands and change falling out of the pockets of my husband and the groomsmen and one of my uncles, or at least one of my uncles. And after the honeymoon, we settled back into work and fixing up the townhouse, decorating inside by painting all these accent walls in each room and hanging curtains and all that, and putting in a deck in the backyard and flowers in the yard. And I loved saying that I was married. I loved saying my husband. I loved hearing him refer to me as his wife. And we showed off our new life by hosting many dinner parties, large ones and small ones. And we seemed to be the perfect couple. And yet I kept expecting more of my husband, waiting for him to become ambitious and successful like the husbands of so many of my friends and colleagues, and like so many of the men I worked with who were husbands and fathers. In my work in human resources, I had access to the salaries of all employees, and I compared my salary to others, and mostly I compared my husband's salary to others. His salary had become less than mine beginning a couple of years into our marriage, and his salary became exponentially lower than mine over the next several years. He was still working on his bachelor's degree by the time I finished my master's in human resources management at the age of 29. And by the time he graduated, I threw him a party and had written an invitation that I looked for today and realized I'd thrown it out years ago to sort of forget that time in my life. I wish I could put my hands on it because it was fucking hysterical, man. I remember being embarrassed that my husband was in his early 30s when he finally finished his undergrad. So, in the way only I could to sort of save face, I wrote a poem as the party invitation that basically said how patiently I'd waited for him to finish school. And if I were him, I would have been insulted by the poem, and maybe he was. His best friend had come down for the party from their childhood hometown in New Jersey and took him out for the day while I prepared for the party of about 60 people. And when they came back, just as the party was starting, my husband was so stoned out of his mind that he could barely move his mouth to speak. I was out of my mind, humiliated. What would the guests think? Family, friends, and coworkers of mine and his, all the already way more successful people than he was. What would they think? To know not only was he a slacker academically and professionally, but he was also a fucking stoner. I remember practically dragging him upstairs to our bedroom, gritting my teeth and lowering my voice, speaking with venom and from deep in my throat, demanding that he put on his sunglasses and to get his shit together. He couldn't wipe the stupid grin off his face, so I kicked him in the shin as hard as I could. I'm sure he couldn't feel it, and my mind went back to pulling off another good show, a fabulous dinner party for my cute but stupid husband who I pretended to be proud of. I literally remember wishing that he'd just finished his PhD instead of a bachelor's and a joint. As I'm describing this man now and my disappointment in him, the listeners have got to be wondering why all these years later, I still feel a sense of loss on the anniversary of my wedding day. Clearly, it's the loss of the idea of marriage forever, of building a life with someone and progressing over the years together academically and professionally, and then eventually buying a bigger home and even having a family, except I knew not to have children with this slacker of a man. The more successful I became academically, professionally, and financially, the more he would slow down and make comments about how he'd be happy to be a stay-at-home dad. This literally repulsed me on so many levels that all I could do was announce to anyone who asked or hinted at us having kids that we would think about it after 10 years of marriage. So I cut off any discussion about it. And I want to say more about why I was repulsed. There was really three reasons. A, he wasn't inspired by me to do better with his own education and career. I mean, shit, we've been dating since I was 19, he was 20, and we pretty much had the same starting point. You know, we were both on our own financially, had been for some time from our families. He was working full time as a non-degreed mechanical engineer at a local defense contractor. I was working in bars full time at night and putting myself through school during the day. I was paying my rent and my tuition. So why didn't he do the same thing? B, how could any man think it could possibly be sexy to be a stay-at-home dad? And look, I'm not against the stay-at-home dads out there and their wives are okay with that. This man would not have been your role model stay-at-home dad. He didn't really appreciate me. He'd say he was proud of me, but I could tell that I emasculated him. And he really gave up. I knew it. And see, I'm sure that he would have goofed off all fucking day while I would have been at work, busting my butt. I could imagine that he would have been drinking beer and getting stoned, and that I'd come home to a child plus this man child to pick up after too. So no fucking thank you. Eventually, We sold our townhouse and both took jobs with our respective companies in New York. We transferred to Manhattan. He did start his MBA and a new career in finance in a shitty entry level position. And I was so embarrassed for him and myself that after all our years together, he was still playing catch up with me. He was feeling it too and wanted to separate after a year in New York City. That's a whole other story to tell, which I have told in a 387-page memoir about the 1 year period in my life, starting with a devastating, at the time, day when my husband told me with a flat and distant look on his face that he'd been thinking about it for a year to ask for a separation. He really did me a favor, and I've been on a self-discovery journey in fits and starts and feeling mostly free ever since. That's it for today's episode. This has been Dee Dee Mendez with Audacious Freedom, the podcast. Thank you for listening, and I can't wait for next time.